Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bible Quest. This is the Thursday edition. We're so glad you're able to join us on this occasion. Um, if you're coming in on the YouTube, watching us on YouTube, go ahead and fill out the comment section there, and we'll see your comments. We'd like to respond back to you. Or you can go to BibleQuest.org at any time and fill out the form on that website, and we'd love to hear from you and talk further about whatever topics you want to talk about or things that we're talking about, such as tonight. Now, we don't have a full complement tonight on Bible Quest. Kenny, who's normally with us, and Carl. Well, Kenny's AOW, absent without leave. Actually, no, he asked. He said he's got some other things coming up, and he had to bow out tonight. So, Carl's here though. How you doing, Carl?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you, Drew. I miss Ken being here, but it's good to be back together on this.
Yeah. I think we'll be able to. We'll do our best we can without him, but I'm Lord willing, we'll see Kenny back next week. So we're going to pick up in. We're going to continue our discussion in Mark 13, where Jesus is foretelling the destruction of the temple. Some people think he's talking about the end of time, but in Mark 13, it's quite clear it's about the temple. And in Mark 13, we also know who he's talking to. He's not talking to a whole group of people. You mentioned that last week, right, Carl? In fact, they're named in what? Mark 13:3. Peter, James, John, and Andrew. In fact, it says they asked him privately. So this was a private conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. Last time we set this up, if you haven't seen the first part of this that deals with verses 1 through 4, I suggest you watch that first. But we set up how this is the same context in Mark 13, Matthew 24, and Luke 21. And in Matthew and Luke, it's not as clear that it's a private conversation, but here in Mark, it's really clear, and it's with 4 apostles. So Jesus is talking about a question they asked, and they asked after describing the beauty of the building they'd just come out of, this temple from Herod. They asked about it, and Jesus said it was going to be destroyed, not one stone left on another. And they said, can you tell us when this is going to be and what will be the sign when this will be fulfilled? So their question is about the end of this Jewish temple and this Jewish worship. At best, they're thinking about the end of their age, but not the end of the world.
Well, to them, that would have been the end of the world, right?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, that had to be a shocker. This is the temple. God dwells in this temple, and we worship in this temple. And what a beautiful temple, right, Lord? Yes, it's beautiful, but it's not going to be here. It's going away. That had to be a shock.
Absolutely. And it's not the first time the temple's been destroyed. They've got a history with that already, when the Babylonians destroyed it before, and it was the end of an era then. But you think about even some of the language that'll be used later in this context. He'll talk about the days of Noah, and he'll talk about Lot. Those were times of judgment, and it was the end of the world for the rest of the world except Noah and his people. It was the end of the world for the Sodomites and the Gomorrites, except for Lot and his family that got out. So those are fitting pictures of judgment, and it's going to be the end of the Jewish world, as it were. But these texts are not talking about the final destruction of the world. And I want us to see that by looking at the text. That's what I intend to do as we go through these several lessons.
Yeah, we have to look at the context to understand what is really being said. And we also, wouldn't you say, we should be looking at it through their eyes, the culture, the religious people, the audience that he's talking to. How are they receiving it? Because he's speaking to them. Now, that doesn't mean he's not speaking to us today, but the conversation was speaking to them, and that would be in their near future.
Exactly. Yeah, and he'll clue them into that.
Okay.
He's giving them a warning about something that would happen in their lifetimes. He'll say that specifically.
Yeah. I don't want to get ahead of you. Go right ahead. So where are we going tonight? Where are you picking up at?
So we did the first 4 verses last time, really setting up the context. We're going to be basing in Mark 13. There will be parallels in Matthew 24 and Luke 21. But in Mark 13, I want to do the reading in verses 5 through 8 tonight and just look at that. It's Jesus' first response to them after they ask, when will these things be and what will be the sign? He's actually going to start by saying what isn't the sign.
Hey,
So,
just realize something. They're not saying because Peter has said something like this in the past, right? Lord, I'm not going to let that happen to you. What do you mean you're going to do that? But here, when he tells them that, they don't say, oh, Lord, that's not going to happen. They just say, when is that going to happen?
yeah, they've been part of some overwhelming conversations during this last week of Jesus' life. They're starting to accept these things. And so they just say, okay, well, tell us when and how. What's it going to look like? Because
Okay.
that's just amazing to think that's even possible. They're in Jerusalem. They're at the time of the arrival of the Messiah. Surely God's going to establish his kingdom. And now Jesus is saying that the temple's not going to be part of it. How is that possible? Well, it is going to be part of it, but not the physical temple. And that's going to be the issue.
Excellent point. Yeah,
Right.
they're looking at the kingdom coming, and the temple's not going to be part of the kingdom. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So let's pick up in verse 5 here in Mark 13. Tonight I'm going to switch up. I've been reading from the New King James, but my notes are based off of the English Standard, so I'm going to read from the English Standard Version tonight. Mark 13, verses 5 through 8. And Jesus began to say to them, see that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and they will lead many astray. And when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. These are but the beginning of the birth pains. Some of the versions say the beginning of sorrows there, but the
Well,
literal translation is the beginning of birth pains.
wait a minute, Carl. Wait a
Uh-huh.
minute. You were just reading through it. Verse 7.
Uh-huh.
Wars and rumors, do not be alarmed. This must take place before the end, but the end is not yet. See, he's talking about the end of the world.
The end is not yet. The end of whatever he's talking about is not yet.
That's the
So
point.
there is a context.
That's the point. Some people go right in there and he's talking about the end of the time, the end of the world. No, look at the context.
So what I think is fascinating, though, Drew, as we look at this, the first thing Jesus says when they start asking about this, don't be led astray. Don't let people fool you about this. It's amazing to me that the thing that people most do with these texts is they're leading people astray. They've been led astray because they're not looking at the context. They're not taking advantage of the warning that Jesus himself is giving. So there's a real danger of being fooled if we don't recognize what Jesus has said and love what Jesus has said. This is a really Jewish sort of warning. God has given this sort of warning all through. In the time of Moses, he did this, and Jesus has done this too. The Apostle Paul just talks about the need for loving God's word and standing on God's word. Let me give you an example of that. In Matthew 19, there's a warning there, and it's not similar in scope, but they're asking Jesus, the Pharisees are asking Jesus, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? And Jesus says, well, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female?
Okay,
So,
that's Matthew 19, and you're reading at verse 4, just so our audience knows where you're at.
yes, Matthew 19, 3 and 4.
3 and 4.
Jesus goes back to the word and says if they need correction on what they believe, they should be looking to the word for that. They're asking Jesus. They're trying to get him to trip up in a condemnation. And he says, just go back and read what the word says. And the point is, they were rejecting what originally was said about marriage and trying to come up with excuses for divorce. But over and over, God points them back to the word and loving his word. If you want to know the answer to tough questions, go look at what God said about it. But there's warnings all through. Think about this one, for example, in Galatians 1. This is Paul's warning about what happens for those who turn from the truth or don't love the truth. In Thessalonians, he says that specifically, but I like the way he puts it in Galatians 1. If you want to read for us, Drew, if you've got that, Galatians 1, 6 through 9.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite passages. In verse 6 in Galatians 1, Paul says, I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting him who called you in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel. Not that there is another one, but there are some who trouble you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one that we preach to you, let him be accursed. How far did you want me to go?
That's good enough. The point is, there's one truth that God's revealed. If somebody comes bringing something else, then they're not of God. They need to be anathema, cut off. That's what Jesus is saying here as well. I'm telling you ahead of time what this is going to look like. A lot of people are going to come later and say, well, here's what it is. And I'm telling you it's not. So if you believe me, you'll know the truth. If you go with them, you're going to be caught up in lies. He starts off with a warning. And I think that's amazing. They've asked, when's this going to be? What's it going to look like? And he says, let me tell you what it's not going to look like. Don't get caught up in that. So later, he's going to use this same kind of warning and say that when he finishes his exhortation to them, he's going to tell them again, don't be caught up. Don't be taken away by the error of others. I'm sorry, I meant to have this verse open. It's in Mark 13, 21 to 23. So right here, he's giving them a warning, don't be led astray. And then he says again, I'm in Matthew, sorry. It's like, that doesn't look right. Mark 13, 21 to 23, at the end of his exhortation here in this same text, he's going to give them a very, very similar warning.
Okay,
it's a common thing.
Before you go, this is still all the same context that he's talking about when the temple is going to be destroyed.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And so what he says there toward the end of this warning here is, if anyone says, look, here's the Christ, or look, he's there, don't believe it. False Christs and false prophets will rise. They'll show signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. But take heed. See, I have told you all things beforehand. So if we know what Jesus says about it, we're not going to get caught up in these later doomsdayers that come along saying, well, here's what it really is. I know what Jesus said. I'm just going to believe what Jesus said. I don't need what you're telling me. I've already got what Jesus said. So that's important. This is a principle that was established all the way back in Deuteronomy 13. We don't have time to go back and read all of that, but if you want to go check Deuteronomy 13, verses 1 through 5, he tells them how to tell a false prophet. A false prophet will say, I can do this sign or this wonder. And he says, okay, and then he does it. So does that make him a true prophet? Maybe. That's one of the tests. The other is, are the things he's saying contrary to following God? Is he causing you to fall after other gods? God has allowed that miracle to happen to test you, it says in verse 5. He wants to know if you'll follow his word or if you'll follow the word of this prophet that's come along. And so he allowed that miracle even to happen. So this is a principle. The word of God is more important than the signs. The word of God, once established, is more important than the signs. And Jesus is saying, I've already told you, when these false Christs come along producing signs and wonders, don't listen to them, because I've already told you what you need to know.
Today, people are looking at the war in the Middle East, and they're pinpointing details of what's happening, Russia and Israel and Hamas and everything that's going on over there. And they're pointing to those things as signs. Now, they're not miraculous, obviously, but they're still, today, people are using them as signs to try to, I don't know, to scare us or to sell books. Primarily, they're selling books about what they're saying. All of this refers to the rapture, the tribulation, and him coming back again.
Exactly. Remember that we did the podcast recently on the red heifer. That's supposed to be a sign over there in Israel that the red heifer is available and the ashes have already been burned. It's a sign that the third temple is coming, something you don't read about ever in the New Testament at all. It's made up completely. But that idea that people today are still being led astray because they spend all their time looking for signs instead of reading what Jesus actually said. He said, these things they're calling signs are not going to be the signs. So think about this. Wars and rumors of wars, he said, are not the signs. Nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom, earthquakes, famines. Every time one of those things happens, people say, it's it. It's a sign of the end. Revelation's being fulfilled. That is not. Jesus said those aren't the signs.
That's amazing. Wars, nations fighting and warring against each other. That's not a sign.
Yeah. So the language he's using, though, when he talks about wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation, it's not the first time the Israelites have heard this. If you go to Isaiah 19 with me, I want to read what he says there. The language is almost exactly the same, and it's language of judgment. And there he's got a specific nation in mind. I think he does here. I think he's going to judge the Jewish nation in Mark 13. But in Isaiah 19, he uses the same language. He says, Behold, the Lord rides on a swift cloud. Here comes Jesus in the clouds in the New Testament. This is God on the cloud in the Old Testament.
All right, this is Isaiah 19,
Isaiah 19, 1
verse
and 2.
1. Okay, go ahead.
So he rides on a swift cloud and will come into Egypt. The idols of Egypt will totter at his presence. The heart of Egypt will melt in its midst. I will set Egyptians against Egyptians. Everyone will fight against his brother, everyone against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. The same language. It's judgment language, and it's very Jewish judgment language. These are just words. These are things that God uses in general when he judges sin. It is not something specific to this event. In fact, when he says this is the beginning of the birth pains, that also is not something new. In Genesis chapter 3, when Adam and Eve sinned, you know what he said? You're going to start having birth pains. There's a result, there's a consequence of your sin. That became a symbol throughout the Bible of the consequence of sin and judgment. That was a sort of a judgment on Adam and Eve, these birth pains, the whole process. So if you'll turn with me to Romans 8, I want to show you how Paul uses that same language. And he's not saying this is some future thing that's going to happen. He talks about it as being a part of life on the earth right now. Romans 8,
what verse?
20 through 22, if you'd read those for us.
20 through 22 of Romans 8. But the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. Yeah, there's the language you said.
So Jesus is saying to them, all these things are going to continue like they always have. All of these generalized judgments of God on nations and these birth pangs that we're suffering because sin is in the world are going to continue. There's none of those that are a specific sign that you're looking for. So don't be led astray by people coming and saying these are the signs. After he says that, after he lists all of these things, he says, these are not the signs. Don't be fooled. The end is not yet. The sign you're looking for the end is not here. In fact, this is just part of the beginning. This has been going on since the beginning. So those who don't know the truth or who ignore Jesus' truth or reject it are the ones who end up claiming these very things that Jesus said aren't the signs are the signs. It's every day somebody says, wars and rumors of wars, earthquake, famine, the signs are being fulfilled. Jesus said, these aren't the signs. So if somebody brings those, reject those right away.
Let me ask you. I don't know if this is going to take you off topic. Or no, it won't take you off topic. This is going to derail you from where you're trying to go. What's the application of this context for us? Because he's talking to them. He's telling them, you're going to see the temple go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a prophecy. And they end up seeing it go. Some of them were still alive, as he said later on. You might want to save that for next time. So that was the application to them. What is the application for us?
Well, I think part of this and what he's training them to do is they need to trust him at what he says. These things sound fantastic. There is a day coming when this whole world is going to be destroyed. He's not talking about that here. Later in other texts, he will mention that. He'll talk about it coming like a thief in the night. There are no signs when a thief in the night comes. He doesn't call first and say, are you home? I'm on my way. That doesn't happen.
So even his second coming is not going to have signs.
Absolutely. But people are reading this text as though it's the second coming. That's the problem. This is a coming. And this is something that is very Jewish also. Isaiah 19, did God come in judgment? Yeah, he came riding a swift cloud into Egypt. Here, he's going to come on the clouds into Jerusalem. He's going to destroy Jerusalem and the temple. It is not the second coming to receive the saved back up to heaven. That is not what Jesus is talking about here. If you keep it in the context, he never switches from the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. I know that because of a verse we're going to see later when he says all of these things will happen during this generation. And it's going to be all the stuff that people are saying are happening now in our generation. This is many generations removed. It's too far off in time. Jesus is talking about things that are getting ready to happen, and he's warning them about them. One of the things I think is fascinating, I'll let you say something just a second, Drew, but you get Jesus talking about this. It's in 3 of the 4 Gospels. The only Gospel it's not in is the one written after this had already happened. The Gospel of John was written 20 years after the destruction of Jerusalem. It's in the book of Hebrews. The day is approaching, he says there. It's written just before the destruction of the temple. It's telling the Hebrew Christians, don't tie yourself to Moses or you're going to go defend that temple and die. Come outside the city. Come out to Jesus, is what he says in Hebrews 13. And the last thing I'll say is in Acts 7, Stephen gets stoned to death because he's talking about Jesus destroying the temple. That still hadn't happened yet, but they were all talking about it until it did. So it's a major point up until it happened. After it happened, there's no more Judaism. There's only Christianity if you want to serve God faithfully. Now, you had an interjection. I'd love for you to speak.
Oh, man, you got me really thinking in a couple areas. Generation, this generation, don't forget that. But then you just said something about, I'm already starting to lose it. Jesus warned them, and you said it quickly, but there's passage, and I'm not sure where that passage is off the top of my head. It might even be in Mark. No, I think it's in Matthew. When you see these things happening,
he's going to give them a sign. Yeah.
He says, get out of town.
Yeah.
And his history tells us that, secular history tells us that the Jews, the animosity between Jews and Christians, I think was increasing. And one of the things they complained about was that you Jewish Christians, you didn't help us when the armies were coming up against us. You ran and fled and got out of town.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that because Jesus warned them, when you see these things happen, get out of town. But here's my point. Today, these guys that are prophesying about the end times are telling us we need to help Israel.
Right.
That's the total opposite what Jesus said.
Because they expect there's going to be another temple and Jesus will come back through that temple and reign in physical Israel. It is a complete aberration of what the Bible actually teaches. And they incorporate some of the language from here into that. I'm not sure where they get, it's from Romans, they get most of their teaching on that. It's just a wrong doctrine. Jesus is not going to come back and reign in physical Israel.
And there's prophecy that's impossible. I call it the curse of Kanaya. We'll talk about that at another time.
Okay.
Jeconiah, same guy.
Right.
But the point I wanted to get to was Jesus says, get out of town. Today's modernists say, no, we got to go to town.
Yeah.
That's the total opposite of what Jesus said. Now, back to the generation thing.
We haven't got to there yet in the reading yet. We're going to save that for a future one.
Okay.
I'll talk about it today, but we will get there in a future.
And I won't bring this point up. This is good. I'm glad, because I don't want to derail you on that. Okay.
What I really want to hammer home with this, I want to just kind of hold it to these 4 verses today, 5, 6, 7, and 8, that Jesus' first warning to them was not to be led astray. And that needs to be the warning we're making to people who are buying into these sort of doomsday prophets. Don't be led astray by them. Go read what the Bible actually says. And if you'll do that, you'll see that Jesus said the things they're calling signs today, those aren't the signs. Those wouldn't be the signs for that destruction, and they're not the signs for a thief coming in the middle of the night. That's a whole other topic.
Wouldn't you say that that's one of the applications for us?
I think that's exactly the application for us.
Okay.
Don't follow false Christs. Trust the word of truth as it's been revealed, and stay with that. There's going to be nation against nation, wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes and famines, all of these things going on. That's just part of the birth pangs. It's part of what we suffer as people on a broken world. But Jesus has established his kingdom, and we can be a part of it today. We don't have to be a part of the brokenness anymore. But when he comes back, it will put an end to everything. This is not dealing with his coming back in the end. This is coming back to destroy Jerusalem and the temple. That's what this text is. We will get there. If you'll hang with us in these studies and go through each one individually, you'll be able to see how they each one builds to his conclusion, and that is there is a time to get out of Dodge. I'll tell you what the sign is. And when he does, it's get out of Jerusalem, not get out of the world, get out of Jerusalem.
Yes, exactly. Okay, yeah. So let's want to put a pause there for tonight.
I think so. We'll pick up next time on this series in verse 9 through 13. But we'll hold off here tonight.
Yeah. And so if anyone, I mean, my head's going through with questions and the comments, so I'm going to save them for next time. But if you're not in the audience and you're listening to this, I would say this is part 2 of the series, right? I don't even know how many parts there's going to be, but this is part 2. And we'll know when I post them, I'll number them in
Right.
that order. Seeing you next time. BibleQuest.org using the 4-page there, or subscribe to that way you can find when these things are posted. You see when they're posted. Oh, I really appreciate the effort work you're putting in. I look forward to what next time.
Thank you, Drew. I look forward to next time as well. God bless.
God bless.